Hello and welcome to the Prog Analyst. Today we're going to be talking about the Dream Theater song, Surrounded. We're in the key of G major and we start the song with an open sus sort of sound. In the right hand of the keyboard part, we have this arpeggio of the notes D, A, and G. And we have stacked fifths in the left hand, which also have those same notes. So it's like a G sus2 sound. Then the right hand stays exactly the same, while the left hand changes to the same chord shape, just starting on C. So it's like a C sus2, but it also has a 6. It's a very open sound that's created by stacking fifths. Still, because of the root motion, this sounds like a 1 chord and this sounds like a 4 chord. I'm going to briefly go through the harmony that happens in this sort of intro section. Again, we move 1, 4, 1, 4. Here things change a little bit. It's still all diatonic harmony though. We have, this is 2 minor, this is 1, and then this is our 4 chord again. And then it does a similar thing again. 2 minor, 1. Instead, this time we go to 3 minor, and then back to 2 minor. Just moving around a lot of diatonic chords in G major. This is our 4 major 7, C major 7. And then the bass note stays on C while the right hand changes to D. So it's like a D7 chord in third inversion, D over C or D7 over C. This would be our 3 minor, 6 minor, and then this we've already seen 2 minor, 1, 4. 2 minor, 1, 4. 2 minor, 1, 4. Then 5, that's going to bring us into 1 with the tempo change in the next section. But let's back up first and talk a little bit about the melody. Our first phrase starts on beat 3 and is a 2-measure phrase that just uses 3 notes, B, A, and G. And the following phrase takes that same exact thing, except it's a little shorter. It doesn't have that last note here. So a slightly truncated variation on that second phrase. Then we get new melodic information. We also get a new note. It starts on the note C, but otherwise it uses the same range and the same pitches. It starts on beat 1 now on that note C and then moves down to G by the end of the phrase. And then we repeat that idea again, except instead of being truncated this time, it's extended a little bit. It goes back up to A and back down to G, so we get an extra 2 beats of melody there. Yet you can see that this part and this part are more or less the same. Although this uses the same notes as our first phrase and starts on the same beat as our first phrase, the I Know It's Easier melody here is a different pattern, but we still feel like we're still kind of in the same melodic world because it's the same notes and starting on the same beat. Again, this is a new melody, but it's still drawing from most of the same notes until it goes down to the E at the end. Overall, we're existing primarily in this world that exists between G and the C above it. And you can see that here. We do the same exact thing. This is just C, B, A, G. It's very similar to this phrase that we saw up here, just with a little bit different rhythm. But anyways, this all raises shelter to the sky. That kind of melody gets repeated here. Here beneath the star tonight, I'll lie. And then we get it one more time, but it's extended as I awaken from the longest night. And with that, we get into our next section, which is a new meter and a new tempo. This section's in 9/8. We have a little bit of a guitar solo. This section introduces a few things that get used for a lot of the next portion of the song. It introduces the new meter of 9/8. It introduces the chord progression, which moves from 1 to 4, 5, and flat 7, borrowed from the Mixolydian mode. And it also introduces a G pedal tone, which also gets used throughout a good portion of this next section. After the guitar solo, we get the main synth hook of the song. I know we've already talked in a few videos just this year about the concept of having 2 different time signatures that are happening at the same time. And this is a perfect example of that. We have 9/8 as the main time signature that most of the instruments are playing here. But if you look at the synth part, it's a 5/16 pattern that gets repeated. But then at the ending, we have to have a 3/16 pattern just so that it can catch up. So the red, blue, and green are all repeated pattern of 4 notes, but that take up 5/16 notes worth of time. And then this is a shorter version of that just kind of catches us up so that the downbeat of 1 in this next measure, both patterns start again on 1 in the same place. These patterns are very similar. The synth hook just takes this pattern and just moves it around based on the chords that are underneath, and the chords underneath are exactly the same. It's that G, C, D, and F with G in the bass that whole time. Another big difference between this lyrical section we're about to hear and the intro is that the melodic range is drastically different and it's much higher for the most part. You can see it immediately starts on the high G, whereas earlier in the song, the highest we ever got was the D below that. And even that was especially high for that section. This section doesn't just stay in 9/8 the whole time, it also switches to 4/4 a few times throughout the song. I think that the 9/8 is a little bit more difficult for people to feel. It's a more atypical groove that you don't really hear as much in rock music. So if we think of these first 4 measures of vocal melody as being unsettled and unsure, by the time we get to this more stable 4/4 groove, it feels a lot more relaxing and comfortable. After 4 measures in 9/8, followed by 4 measures in 4/4, I would call that our A section, and this next bit is our B section. Or perhaps refrain section, maybe. It doesn't exactly feel like a chorus to me. Regardless, we get new melodic and harmonic information. Harmonically, we no longer have a G pedal tone. We have a C chord, which is our 4th chord, in first inversion, so an E in the bass. And then we have D, which is our 5 chord, followed by 4 measures of G. The drums here also go into double time, and they switch between double time and regular time throughout this B section or refrain section. Our refrain section ends with a variation of the title, Let Light Surround You, and then we go back to this familiar 5/16 synth hook riff that we heard earlier in the song. This then takes us into our second verse, which has the same harmonic information as the first, but the drums are in double time, and the vocal melody has a completely different melody. My favorite part about the second verse melody is when it goes light to dark, dark to light to dark, dark to light. And the reason I like it so much is because it employs something that we've already kind of seen. It takes a pattern that's 5/16 notes long, and it repeats it over the 9/8 feel. So you can see each one of these different colors here, red, blue, green, and orange, are a 5/16 note pattern that gets repeated in the vocal melody against the 9/8 time. When we switch to 4/4 in the second verse, our vocal melody really starts to build. We start on this high G and go just as high as A, but then in the following measure, we poke up a little bit further, going up to B. Then we, in our next measure, start on A and go just a little bit higher up to C. So this is gradually building in intensity as the melody climbs higher and higher and higher, reaching new peaks in each measure. This new trend of the melody being higher carries over into our second refrain section as well. This is the start of our second refrain section. You can see that the melody stays in that same kind of world with a lot of high C's in there and really existing between G and C, but now the higher range of each of those pitches. Again, we end with this refrain, Let the Light Surround You. That takes us into our next section, which is a guitar solo. The drums are double time during this guitar solo. The chords are the same, G, C, D, and F. But if you look at the rhythm of what the guitar is playing, he actually just takes the same rhythmic figure and he just moves it around, gradually getting higher and higher to build intensity until he gets to the ending, where he spills off to climactically end the solo. Then we have sort of 2 outros in the song. One is an outro from the fast tempo, and then we have an actual outro that is reminiscent of the intro that we had at the slower tempo. So this sort of first outro has a lot of new information in it. Looking at the chords real quick, we have, this is our 2 minor, A minor, then we have D over F sharp, which is our 5 chord in first inversion. E minor is our 6 minor chord. G over D is our 1 chord in second inversion. And then C sharp diminished would be our sharp 4 diminished. You can also think of this as being like an A7 without much of an A. It does play an A on the and of 2. Regardless, it is borrowed from Lydian and has a little bit of crunch to it before we get back to the diatonic harmony here. All of these chords are again diatonic. You do see that C sharp diminished come up again, followed directly by A for what it's worth, so that this could all be seen as an A7, I guess. And then once again, we have this build up that we saw actually going into the fast section, but now it's getting slower instead of faster like it was before. We have the bass just going up A, B, C, D, while we have diatonic chords that eventually bring us to G, where we end the section. And our final outro of the song at the slower tempo, again, is reminiscent of what we heard in the intro. It's basically the same as the beginning. We have very similar chords, we have very similar melodies, but we end with our lyric, "Tonight I'll still be lying here surrounded in all the light." And as after the first 2 refrain sections of the song where they said, "Let the light surround you," a fitting lyrical conclusion to the song and the slower tempo at both the beginning and the end give this song a nice, complete bookend sort of feel that at least leaves me as a listener feeling very fulfilled. That's my breakdown of Surrounded by Dream Theater. Thank you for watching. Please like it and share with anyone else who might be interested, and if you want to see more of these videos, please subscribe as well. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else about the song you enjoy or find interesting that I might not have mentioned. Thanks again.